So welcome to the Node.js Community Security Working Group meeting for February 25th, 2019. We'll follow our standard agenda that was in the issue. First thing is, does anybody have any announcements this week? No announcements, okay. So on to the items tagged for the agenda. The first one is add Ron Paris to the list of current team members, number 492, or is it 490?
I think one's an issue and one's a pull request.
Okay, right. So I guess at this point, it's got a couple of LTGMs. And the only question would be, is there any, unless there's any objections, which should probably land, right?
Yeah. And Ron, who do we have pairing with you? I think, was it Marcin?
Yep, that's right.
Awesome.
Cool.
Okay, so let's move on to the next issue. The next one is nominating, I guess that's 490. Okay, so that's the same issue. How can we utilize the funding from the ecosystem program? So that's number 475. And Loran, you're probably going to take the lead on that discussion, right?
Yeah, so let's talk about it for a second. I'll move to that one as well. All right, cool. So there's been a discussion generally about like whether we can open it for discussion of what we would do and how would we set up the criteria for like which bounties would be like valid or not. So I think overall we should probably figure this out in an open manner. I would just generally, before we do that, what I think I just said at one of my latest comments there is, if we are good on the split, which I think we're getting now all the thumbs up on the split of the budget, I think that's good enough to first of all get the discussion now back with Coinbase rolling, so they would be able to, to just put that money through HackerOne. And so as far as I understand from HackerOne, it's entirely anyway a manual process. So like when a bug comes in and we want to issue a bounty for it, that's anyway a manual process. So until we figure that out in terms of the criteria to set out, we have time. So I don't want to like block it until we get those two things out. If there is no other strong, opinion against my comment from 9 days ago, it's three comments up from the last one. Or if you want to discuss it, I'm open for that, but let's close it so I can take it back to Coinbase and just finalize that plan.
Right, and I guess the rationale is we already have some funding for Node Core bounties, so yeah, this is expanding that to most of it goes to the ecosystem bounties.
True, and the swag part is something that, I don't know, maybe with the help of Tyranny from the ComCom, or we tried this back with Tracy as well, but she was like completely overloaded and there was some legal issues and people kind of got replaced there. But generally, we also try to get the swag thing going on before as well. So we can either retry it, or if legal is okay, we can just do it with money from external sources. So we don't need to also like go through a lot of bureaucracy processes for that to work.
Right. So sorry, what was it you tried before to get some funding from the foundation? Was that it?
Yeah, I think there was a point in time about 6 months ago or so where we had this conversation with Tracy. And we tried to figure out how could we get, I think it was just stickers or maybe t-shirts back then.
Right, yeah.
So we could, like, this is how we wanted to recognize security researchers back then. Like, we didn't have any budget for it. So we thought maybe we can do that with some money. But I think the problem wasn't specifically the budget. It was also like legal and stuff like that to see if we can do it or not, because
well, the legal part is, can we actually use the Node.js logo on things? That doesn't change, unfortunately.
I think it wasn't just that. I think it was, so Tyranny, to your question, it's, I think Tracy Lee was in the discussion. I'm pretty sure. And it's not illegal about the logo. It was like if we do want to print it, so like it has to go through the Node Foundation, like their collaboration with some, I don't know, entity to print it or whatever.
Like we had a preferred. I thought it would be more around
or something. Yeah, I don't know.
Just getting the okay to use the logo in anything is sometimes a challenge.
Yeah, that we would anyway, I guess, need to go through. So yeah, but we can start this discussion again once we also have the budget for it. So like we would make it happen.
So does Coinbase basically they're just going to donate dollars, or are they going to manage the bounties once?
No, I think it's donating dollars. It's basically putting this 15K in the bank of HackerOne, and we would be on our discretion, obviously based on like an open criteria that we set.
Yep.
And reward the bounties for reports that come in.
Okay, and HackerOne can do the swag and stuff as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Tracy has been doing that already for the Node Foundation, like through the shop that she set up. So I think she would be able to really help us quickly with that. But we can also try HackerOne. Like, I don't think they have something specific, but we can try see if they would want to help us.
I was just curious, like that. I wouldn't have guessed that they did. So okay, so it'd be like we'd want Coinbase to give HackerOne the 12,000, and then the 3,000 we might want to get to the foundation to then be able to direct swag and stuff.
Yep. Maybe something like that.
Yeah, I guess that if everybody's agreed with the split, then it's the next step is reaching back to those two groups to say this is the plan and what do we got to do.
Also, by the way, maybe Coinbase could just do the swag for us. I think it would generally be maybe easier because like we wouldn't need to handle like transfers of money and all of this stuff. Like we would just tell them what we want.
Yeah, I mean, it's like hey, you can send this person that might make things easier.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I'm open to figuring out how we can roll that forward. So I don't really care one way or the other, except just making that happen.
Whatever's going to be the easiest for everybody.
Yep. All right. So basically, just on that, to conclude after the intro and everything. So again, if there's no one any strong opinion against that, then like I'll just probably anyway just connect with them tomorrow or the rest of the week sometime. I'll just reach out to them. I'll say this is what we have figured out. We'll figure out the criteria for the how to award the bugs in a separate thread, and that's it. I'll just close this one and open a new one about the criteria, and that's it.
Okay, sounds good. Let me just take a note on that. So Loran will...
Yeah, I can sum it up if you want. You're already ready.
Okay. Okay, anything more on that issue before we move on to the next one? No, okay. So number 359 is migrate vulnerability database to its own repo.
Yeah, Vladimir, you're on mute, man. Yeah, we can't hear you.
No, you are not here.
Maybe you're speaking French and we're not understanding.
It's being filtered.
It's good policy. It's saying I'm not muted. Okay.
Yeah, Vladimir's definitely not on mute.
Yeah, I think it's your mic coming through.
Okay, we'll just give him a minute to.
Yep.
I'll just say at this point, if there's anybody watching the YouTube stream and they have questions, this is the time where you could paste them in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end of the session.
Okay, should be good now, right?
There, you're back. Yep.
Sorry, that's MacBook believing that I'm having a headset when I'm just having, speakers. Sorry about that. So I finally had time to move forward on that. The repo, the sync up script is set up, and there is a daily job to sync up the two repos. So right now, the next step is to announce publicly on the main repo that the migration will happen in 60 days after the date of the announcement, and then we'd say we would try to stop pushing vulnerabilities to the main repo and only to the new one in 60 days.
Yep.
That might impact what Tierney is doing right now with the vulnerability index, because we'll need to port that on the new repo.
I'm happy to do that work or continue to work in the new repo. That's fine.
Awesome. So yeah, I will publish the announcement today on our repo, and I still have a bit of README to do in the new one.
Okay, yeah, and we should probably get Tracy to get it retweeted or get it retweeted by the foundation account so that we get maximum.
Yes.
You can generally I reach out to the Node.js team a lot, and the person who runs it, I cannot recall her name right now. She is very responsive to us as collaborators. So you can also just send that to her directly. She'd be happy to help. Rachel Ramos.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, I will select you to ping her.
So now I know it's not on the agenda, but now is this maybe a good one under which to discuss a little bit of, the stuff that Tierney has been looking at, the index and so forth?
I'd love
Yeah.
to do that.
I guess it's good time as any.
So just for context, for those of you, if you haven't followed along, I created a issue and then created a PR to create index.json files that effectively just pull together all of the files that are in each vulnerability directory. So one is in npm and one is in core, and that pulls them all together into a single index.json in those directories. Both Lyron and Michael expressed a concern about like duplicating data, which I don't have that concern, but I know that's a concern you all have. And so I, totally happy to work with that and work around that and see, what we can do to have this. My goal is mostly just to have this in a way that is consumable by general users out in, user land, so they can use this data, this massive pool of data that we have. I have a bunch of things I want to build around it, and I've already worked on one project. I think it might be one of the only projects from the ecosystem that uses it. Node release lines that basically did the work that I did in this PR, but it did it inside of the module rather than just pulling from the source. So it'd be great to have this as a consumable kind of asset. That you don't have to write custom parsing logic around, or concatenate all of the files yourself. That's mostly my goal, and I don't particularly care how that's achieved. I just threw out one implementation of how we could get there.
So Journey, I think also David has a project called Gamma Ray, which is somewhat a community ecosystem thing, and is also using this. Maybe David, how are you doing that, and share that with Journey?
Yeah, actually, I think it's a good idea, in my opinion, even though the data is duplicated and there is not a unique source of truth. But the thing is, the data is auto-generated, so there's not going to be human error there, and it's going to be consistent all the time. So at the moment, what I do is I just pull the zip file from GitHub, decompress the file, do a path traversal all the files that are JSON, and then create an in-memory database with all the content and just match the vulnerability. So this file will reduce a lot the overhead of that. So
I guess my question would be though, if that's the format everybody's going to use, should there be one format and that's it?
So what I was thinking is, I mean, the JSON, the individual JSONs are not superhuman readable, okay? Because I mean, now we are at the stage where we have many JSONs on the same folder, so it's super hard to iterate over there. So I'd say even having a single JSON like that, or even an NPM package with a single JSON with all the vulnerabilities would be super helpful.
Right, but I guess my question is, why have the separate ones?
I mean, I think, you know, an answer to that, and this is what I was thinking in approaching it, how I was, is having the individual ones lets you, you know, it approaches how we approach everything in Node, which is in a modular way. So you can kind of manage those individually and not need to care about those. Like, you don't have to build a monolith of data. You can build that monolith from these modular kind of bits. And so, you know, I think even doing this in a separate index JSON, like indices directory might help. But basically, the reason I think that the individual JSON files are useful is maintainability, like the burden on this group rather than the, you know, consumable bit.
So
if that makes sense.
Yeah, if I can just chime in here. So what I'm thinking is, we had this idea in the past where we wanted to get the database to be generally more consumable. That's not just through the GitHub database. So one thing that what we had an idea of is we could actually publish an NPM package, which would have the actual vulnerabilities inside it, like all the vulnerability database. And generally it would help for a lot of stuff. For example, all the breaking changes that we wanted to do around like the different ideas that are going to change from a number to a string and all of those stuff. It would be easier to consume for parties because we could also use the semver thing for it. So like if we would, you know, break the API or the format in some way, it wouldn't necessarily break for you unless you upgrade the package. You could consume it for, you know, putting it in different places. So generally, I think that like this is the idea that I wanted to take with you further and kind of develop on. And then this is also not something that like would specifically add, you know, an implementation detail to how we manage the vulnerabilities. It will be just something that we can, you know, do all of this magic like outside it. So we don't need to duplicate all of this data. We don't need to, you know, add stuff that, you know, would generally maybe make things harder later on, because adding this index is kind of a contract. So people would, you know, use that as a contract, and then, you know, they would rely on it. And if you want to change it, it's now another breaking change, etc. So I don't know, Tierney, how does the NPM package sound to you? Is that something that you would like?
That sounds totally fine to me. And I'm happy to kind of take a stab at that, especially with, you know, the consideration of the data being existing in its own repository. If we want to actually use that repository as the source for the vulnerability or for the module as well, that would probably be a way to kind of reduce confusion in the long run for end users of like, here's the source of this data, and here's how you're consuming. Like, I think that makes a lot of sense as well. I'm happy to kind of work toward that and even help launch that module on that 60-day mark of when it gets transferred over, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Yep. So let's pair on working on that. I think we would need two things to make that happen. Okay. Probably one thing is maybe we need to open another repo under the node.org to manage that package. Like, I'm not sure, maybe it will be part of either the advisories or not. Like, I'm not really sure, like, let's see. But the other thing is, how would we distribute that NPM package? Like, is it going to have like the node.js namespace on NPM, or is it something else? Like, I don't know if generally Node has, like, the Node Foundation has released packages that are like official.
Yeah, we haven't been using a namespace to date. We do ask that people, we have like a Node.js, it's like Node.js Foundation user that we add to the as a maintainer, you know, as a but it's only used for like transition. You know, for example, if all the maintainers disappeared.
And is there like any official package today or something like that we make use of? Like, is there some process for that?
In terms of creating like a new package, a new package on NPM, or
like publishing one.
There's
No.
no well-defined practice, but if you open an issue, there's people who have opinions about it, and
Mhm.
there's occasional thought about. We just haven't gotten to the business of producing many NPM packages yet.
Yeah.
That might change.
So what I could say is, Tierney, if you want to move fast on this, we could maybe open our own org or team or something like that and put it there, like, I don't know, Friends of the Node Foundation or whatever. I don't know, something that would be generic and everyone can take part of that. And then just if this process, as Sam says, it's very opinionated. So once this process gets a little bit more mature and people are kind of, thumbs up about it, we can just transfer this, team.
Well, there's really no issue opening another repo in
It's not just the repo, it's like publishing it under the NPM namespace.
Yeah. I mean, we do have a few.
Publish it under any, like today, all of them, we have a few layers like Node Report, there's Node Add-on API. They're just published with their own name.
Stream.
Published with what?
They're just published with their own name.
Oh, okay.
And
all right, so maybe that could work, yeah.
The Node.js Foundation user is just added as one of the maintainers. So the build work group has access to that password. So if all the maintainers disappeared for some reason, we can log in as that user and add new maintainers. But otherwise, it's, the maintainers would publish it just as if it was a package, any other package.
All right, so let's look at that. I also want to be very diligent in how we're doing that. That's why I'm asking it, because we want to enable 2FA and make sure that everything is set up correctly, especially in those sensitive areas. So like, I'm not really sure how that's managed today. We can take a look and find out if it's good enough for us in terms of the security aspect of that, to make sure that this is really managed well. We could do it under the node practices.
Yeah, it's worth pushing through that, because I don't think we don't have 2FA figured out for those kinds of things, but.
Right, so that's why I would like us, because it's get trickier, right? Like we would want that when when we PR something new, like a new vulnerability to the repo, we would also want maybe for that to trigger a release of the new package, with that vulnerable. So there's like a lot of tokens and stuff going around.
Yeah, that part that may become, that's probably the complicated. The other part is like, what's the contract as well, right? Like.
The contract, I think, is actually, what do you mean the contract getting the?
It's like, do we expect that, say, a part of the security release that needs to be updated as well? Because there's already quite a few steps, right?
So you wouldn't need to, like, what I'm imagining is that every PR that lands in the repo, once that PR of like a new vulnerability lands, either for NPM core or ecosystem, that would itself, like when it gets merged, that would itself trigger the whole publishing process of a new package. So I don't think it changes anything for like the security release, but I think we want to do it in a very secured and organized fashion. So like we would know what's going on there and have those hooks integrated into it. And I think this would be like an ultimate way of providing these vulnerabilities in a very consumable way. And I think, Trini, we can also pair on like, what would the API look like? What would the module look like? So it would work well for all of us. So it's worth kind of a discussion. But overall, I think if we have a good consensus here and like no strong feelings against it, I think we could try taking a stab at it. And if you have some time, it's good if you can push for that.
I think it makes perfect sense to me. I actually have to leave in 1 minute, so I'm just gemmining here. So the fact that we have a big JSON with all the vulnerabilities also enables us to do something which we didn't do before because we were breaking the world, which is change the individual JSONs to a more human-friendly format or something like that. So, I mean, if we document that, if you want to automate the reading of the vulnerabilities, just use the index.json or index whatever, like the full database, we can change the individual reports to something more readable. Because
you'll end up with a similar problem that you can't then change the module without breaking people. I guess you can always say, well, you could create a new module, right?
Yeah.
Not sure I completely got that.
I mean, you can also add additional features that allow that kind of output to be handled.
So just to be clear, what I'm imagining is that this would be like the model that we're publishing is an actual library. Okay, so like it would have actual class methods of, get ID, get report CWE, get, upgrade path, whatever. And,
Right.
and then all the breaking changes that we will do, they would be like, if we change formatting, it's like a new version
Right.
of the model,
It's
and
a
we
build
change
session,
stuff in the code.
Would it
Yeah,
also
okay, that makes more sense to me then. Okay,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, that,
You actually have
right.
a wrapper around it that hides the actual
Yeah,
format.
yeah,
That
exactly.
gets more interesting.
Yep.
So it just happens to store the data internally. Like it could, yeah, how it stores the data internally actually is not
Doesn't matter.
exposed necessarily and doesn't matter. Okay.
Exactly. So that's why
Yeah.
I want to put on this, because I want to make sure that we're doing that in a
Yep.
good way.
Yeah. So no, yeah, having a a class that's exposed and has the things that I can see actually making it a lot easier and being easier to maintain going forward.
Yep. And I think Semver will help us to also adhere to
Right.
that and then do all those breaking changes if we need to. Hope not.
Right. Except that the one challenge there is that, like, if you actually have a new Semver, then you have to you might need then a separate stream which is not Semver, like it maintains the older one but still gets new data, right?
Yeah, that's the
Well,
main issue.
Yeah, the data will have to be separate from the functionality.
Yeah.
I guess, but you'll be shipping the database in the NPM package, right? So if you just go back to an older version of the package, you'll actually get the data at that time.
Right, you
Yep.
get the old data, right? So that's the challenge I see, is that like you're gonna have to consume the newest version of the package. Well, actually, yeah, that's a good
I think
point.
that's a benefit actually, because then if the newest version's broken, you always can get the one that was working last.
Well,
Yeah.
so this is an issue we ran into in, sorry, are we running over? This is an issue we
Nope.
ran into in node release lines, which is we basically do what you're suggesting, which is ship the database with the module. And the problem we have is like we have to keep that updated with every new update of the the registry, which means or with the data that's in GitHub right now. So that means the only real way to reliably do that is we have to maintain that as maintainers, but then the users also have to use it with npx because they can't pin to a version. They can't actually rely on a version because then that data is useless once it's been updated. It's not accurate.
Well, there's like there's two edges for that. Like I don't think anyone actually pins to like a specific version, because that's gonna, if you did it for a module as well, you're gonna pin everything else and you're not gonna get security upgrades for that module as well.
People pin to versions, trust me. They do.
What do you mean? What do you mean build to version? Like Express 1.2.3 without anything before that?
People pin to patches and minors as well.
Oh, okay.
So like if you have a major upgrade, then that's.
It's certainly, though, like in production, you're not going to be dynamically installing, updating your modules, right? Like if there was anything that tried to use this in a production application, it would be, I don't think they would want to have somebody say, oh, and you've got to update the module every single time to get new data.
Well, there are two. So again, there are two ways to do that. One thing is we can publish it and then people can consume it. And obviously they would need to get newer updates to get newer databases. And the other thing is, which is, we're not saying it, but it exists. And that's the API that we want to bring to it. And I think Vladimir already worked on some POC with the Algolia something. Yeah. So if someone would want to like consume in real time the actual database, that exists already, or I don't know, some work in progress that Vladimir can update, but that exists. So you have two choices. Either you get something bundled and you get some kind of an API around it and you can update it whenever you want or every time or whatever, or you work with an API that, the API is also kind of sponsored by, I think, by Algolia and I don't know who else. So like, we can't guarantee uptime and stuff like that. So that's another concern that you have to figure out.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's just a matter of writing down the expected use case for this and say, this is the model that it follows, and for this use case, it fits, right?
Yeah, and this is kind of why I was approaching it with the lighter touch of like put all the JSON together as it exists, because then we can like that index.json for core can just be published to the node.js.org website. And that's not like needing to maintain a module or an API. It's just, this is the data as it exists in the security working group, or in the vulnerability database that we have. That's more of why I was taking that approach, because it's less prescriptive about how you need to use this or why you need to use this. And very much to what Lyron was saying, that API, that like class-based API, is literally what Nathan White, like I didn't contribute, he did all the magic around it. That's what he built in Node Release. Like the module you're talking about is what he built, and he also expressed an interest in giving it to the Node project. So that kind of, all that infrastructure exists already, and we can take that on. That said, the light approach is like, I don't particularly need a module. I just want this JSON, this data. Like, I totally understand that it's breaking, and I'm willing to take that. But I'm just trying to give my thoughts around like why I approached it how I did. I'm not trying to be prescriptive here.
Right.
So I would say that you can manage that index file outside of the security advisories, because that would tie us up into a specific format that I'm not sure that we want to tie our hands to that one. And like, if it's anyway something that's like, like you can always do that regardless, right? Like you can clone the repo, make that, as David was saying, clone the repo and make that that image of the JSON however you want it anyway. Duplicate the data on your own. Like, what would be the difference for you?
For me, having to maintain that, like as a end user, I can't go tell people that there's a source of data that they can rely on, because I'm maintaining it.
Sorry, I wasn't clear. I meant what, like if you take it and like you want to do it for the node.org website, right?
Yes.
So that infrastructure can be managed and owned, like this index and all the infrastructure around it, by the node.org website as well. And then like users would get it for free because we maintain it for them. That's what kind of it was saying.
But it's who is the like, I think that's the key thing, right? Like if we're going to have two, somebody has to maintain the second one, right?
Right.
And then you have the same problems of, well, the contract of, you don't want to break that. So I think that's where I was coming from. It's like, my concern over having duplicate data is that, you've now got two things you've got to maintain, and you still have to keep the contract for them, right? So
So I guess one question I do have is, the JSON right now, what's the contract for that? Like, what is the contract for the JSON as it exists?
We have a validator, so you can like view the actual schema for it.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, yeah, go ahead.
And we have a policy of non-breaking this change without announcing it. So if we change the format, there will be an issue with an announcement 60 days before that. I guess that's our policy right now.
So I mean, I don't know if y'all took a look at how I built the index, but it's literally, when it is run, it just puts all of the JSON files together. It doesn't keep that historically, it just does it then. So that index.json file will always be compliant to whatever rules we're applying to in the JSON files as they exist. Like that same contract can be applied to both. It like is inherently applied. I don't know if that changes anything or helps, but I did want to make sure that's clear.
If there's confusion about just the duplicate data, like do I consume all the files and this file or something like that, I do see maybe a benefit of having it just in a different repo, but still under the group, but doing exactly the same thing. I mean, maybe the automation is a little more complex doing it in another place, but I could see like a simple webhook or something building this file just in another repo that just has the consumed JSON to separate the confusion of the duplicate data.
I guess my question, I come back to the first question. So, okay, it's potentially easier to manage separate files, but is it? Like, I mean, is it, if we're going to have two, who's going to be using the separate file? Like, do we have people we think will want the separate files versus a single JSON?
So the management for us looks easier. Like if we're going to go and edit text or fix a symbol range or something like that, that definitely appears easier to me.
Okay.
Not that the large JSON file is particularly hard, but I do see a couple of different exports of the data that would be useful as well, like exporting them all to Markdown and having that in a visible way on GitHub. Or, there's like a few different exports of the data that I see separate and useful. And the management of its side seems like a single JSON and the source of truth for the validation also being in not a giant file for validation.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No.
That see some benefit to that.
Okay. So I mean, if our model would be like, okay, this is the source of data, but we then deliver it through multiple forms.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I mean, the way I've written the tool, we can also just export it in different ways. Like we can do whatever manipulation on that base. Each JSON file, we can just loop over all of them and export it to Markdown or to CSV or to whatever other format enterprises want to use. We can do whatever with that data we want. Hopefully that's helpful.
So that's at least from my side, at least that's the way that I would want to go for it. As in, I don't want to add this index JSON file as to the way that like the one index into the way that we manage the advisories. I want to all of that happen as a side effect of that. Okay, so either we publish an NPM package or we generate a new different variations of files like you suggested, CSV, but all of those happen, outside of how we manage the vulnerabilities. So they don't dictate, how we manage that in the PR itself and when we land PRs.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I would also be happy. So, I would be happy to build either a Probot app or a GitHub action that effectively, well, we have to get permission to add it to the org, but that would just create a new PR when those directories are changed, add updating, like running that command. It's been a while since I've worked on it, so I don't recall what it's called, but run that command and then PR that. And it would basically just be hitting, like, could manually review and then click merge.
But somehow I think we'd want to avoid the PR.
Okay.
Because that's extra work for somebody, right?
Right. I'm pretty sure it can also be put into an existing PR that changes it. I'd have to, like, if a new file is added to this directory, add this other thing to this PR, add this other commit. I just don't want to mess with y'all's PRs.
Yeah, I'm more like it would be good to be completely separate. So the PR lands, you now have it there. Something then kicks off and pushes a file to like the node.js.org website.
Okay.
Because that would mean that, there's no human, like as soon as you said PR, it's like somebody's got to do something, right? And
yeah. I mean, yeah, because it could be immediately triggered when someone merges a PR into those. So like, ideally, the person could just go back to the PR thing and look again, and it would reference it as well. But yeah, I'm not sure if I can easily do cross repo, but I can definitely look into that.
Yeah, I think it's worth.
I'm happy to do this. Whatever work needs to be done here.
It's a matter like for the website. It's if we can generate the file, put it somewhere, then node.js.org can synchronize that across, but it wouldn't, unfortunately, it's got to be like somewhere outside of a GitHub repo necessarily.
Well, what about having a CI in our repo that pushes that to something like S3 or anything else, and the website would use that directly?
Well, actually, it probably even just makes sense that the machine the website runs on, it's a cron job there that basically pulls the file, generates the, I guess it's that one, there may be a fair amount of data transfer is the only concern.
I guess if we have a raw URL, a unique URL for this file, that might be easier, but...
Well, I guess if it uses Git,
yeah,
like a Git pull should just do an update, so that should be actually fairly efficient.
Exactly, and if we go to the way of publishing that on NPM, that's just a table that will be downloaded.
I think we're talking about not being on NPM.
Yeah,
so do an update. Like I think so it'd be a cron job on the on the website server that basically does a Git pull, combines them all into one file, and then moves it into a directory where it can be downloaded. That seems relatively straightforward.
And I mean, so the way I've set this up right now, it pushes the indices into the core and npm directories. We could also create an index or indices directory and just put it there so it can just look at that directory. If that would be easier and like more explicit with how like the file structure and what exists in what repo, because basically if someone tried to crawl all of those now, they just get like this recursive thing of all of the JSON files and then the mega JSON file.
Well, I guess what I was thinking, the way I was thinking of it, wouldn't actually be in the security repo at all.
Okay.
It's
so
basically,
because you're saying a git pull on what?
Yeah,
repo?
it would basically be like on the CI machine is the easiest that I can think of. We'll have to get feedback from the rest of the build working group, but like it basically could just CD into a directory where the repo's been cloned, do a git pull to get up to the date to the latest, regenerate the file, and then move that new file to the directory where it's served on node.js.org.
Which repo would it be?
No repo at all. The node.js.org website.
Oh, okay.
A post
So, like,
commit.
for example, the current benchmarking and coverage data, those files are generated on by a build job somewhere else, and then they're on a machine that the CI like SSH or rsyncs them across, every 4 hours or something.
Okay.
In this case, though, because I assume it doesn't take much CPU or time to generate that big file, right?
It's not too bad now.
As long as that's not, a CPU or time intensive thing, then I think just a cron job on the CI machine itself might do the trick.
Sorry to interrupt, I'm gonna chime in again, try to approach it from a different angle. I would say if we try to look at it from a higher level is whether we see it as a responsibility of the security working group to create those kind of different variations of exports, like a CSV, XML, JSON format of all of these snapshots. If we do, I would agree with Tierney that it makes sense that we would just, somehow put that PR or not PR, but under the security advisories repo in a different, like not as an index file that is today, but kind of like into like a snapshots directory and have like a snapshot for like exporting it as CSV, JSON, XML, whatever you want to do. And that's it. I mean, if we do think it's a security working group concern and responsibility, then yes. If not, and we would want to defer it outside, then at this point it doesn't really matter in any other way we would do. Anyway, it would be someone else's responsibility, whether that's Tyranny or end users or whatever. And frankly, I'm kind of towards going to Tyranny's initial thoughts that maybe it is something that we want to have snapshots on. I would just say that maybe just need a little bit more thinking of how we can manage those snapshots in a way that, they would duplicate data, obviously, because it's a snapshot that is duplicating all the JSON single files. But how to do that in terms of it wouldn't, on a PR, you wouldn't need to update twice of them. So it would use some kind of the logic that Tyranny did, where it would just concatenate everything together. And would not cause like merge conflicts, because I think we raised a couple of issues there around it. So
Right.
I think that's kind of my gist for it.
So I get where you're coming from in terms of like, should it be in the repo? The only thing I might add to that discussion is one, like, is it going to be more complicated to get it PR'd in or whatever? Or maybe we could just do it on the wiki that would, if there's a wiki in the repo. So we could get in the repo. The thing the website does get as a benefit is, depending on level of usage, it does have things like Cloudflare for caching and other things.
Mm-hmm.
So if you got something you want to distribute to a lot of people, the website may actually be a better choice than using GitHub directly.
But if we put it in GitHub, you could still cron pulling it from GitHub, that master index. But at least we would know that there's the managed place from the working group for that.
Yeah, no, that's true. You could do that too if you wanted.
And so for what it's worth, the reason I've kind of focused on the website, like I realize I bring that context without sharing it with any of you, is there's the current dist directory that has index.json and I believe index.tab, which is effectively all of the Node.js releases and their kind of metadata. And so that's something I use somewhat frequently. And I was assuming that we should probably follow that kind of same paradigm of like node.js.org/vulns or vulns, and then index.json or index.tab or index. Whatever extension you want. So yeah, that's kind of why I approached it in that way. I just wanted to let you know that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
But it sounds like we've sort of triangulated on, at least in this discussion, the agreement that generating that file and putting it somewhere makes sense. So maybe it's the next step is for somebody to figure out what the flow might be. Like the website one, I think I understand fairly well. I don't understand as well how easily you can automate, for checking something into our repo. But if that's easy to do, then, maybe that's just, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, imagine when you're working on the security advisories repo, there's like a pre-commit hook that just puts everything together before it pushes.
Right now, another way is that right now, each time there is something merged on master on this new repo, there's a job that will sync it up with the current repo. So we could just update this job to build and then recommit to master with the build thing. So that's pretty straightforward with what we have right now.
Okay, so it's just a matter, I think, then writing down maybe how, like a flow, and we can work on that in an issue or something like that. Because there's, I guess, a couple questions like, how does it get built? Where does it go? Does it go into the security working group repo? And then finally, should it end up on the website to be downloaded regardless of whether it's in the security repo or not, right? Like, where is it that we want people to go get it is almost a separate question.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's where like website versus module versus whatever other consumption method.
Right.
And like for what it's worth, you can also just like go to the raw.github usercontent.com link and consume it that way. There's like, there's a plethora of ways we could suggest people to consume this.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a different.
But it's almost, we should, come up with our recommended ones just so that we can get, the general feedback on, well, wait a sec, some people may say, no, if it's going to be broadly consumed, it should be the website because you get the Cloudflare caching and all that kind of stuff, or no, it's fine to just come out of the repo, right?
Yeah, for sure. And you also get metrics about how many downloads you're getting from it, or like how many hits on the page you're getting, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Potentially you can get that from the website versus the repo.
In a way, it'll also determine our commitment to the schema. I mean, I presume we're all saying that the schema is going to be consistent through the process, but in a way where you tell them to consume it is where you're really having the biggest commitment.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, and we'll have to publicize our commitment is to give you 60 days notice, otherwise that it may change, right?
And I mean, like, I think Lyron mentioned, I hope I'm saying your name right, I think you mentioned like possibly changing the naming from numbers to like words or something. And right now, like the name of the object, of course I'm dropping out at this point. Sorry, I dropped out, my internet sucks. Right now, the name of the object is actually the name of the file. So in that way, the numbers are very extremely iterable. It's very easy to kind of go over that and get the number, the data you want. But that would introduce things that we would need to let people know about and change over time.
Yeah, I mean, we have a process for announcing those changes. We don't expect to do them too much. It's just I think we've run this kind of report format for a while, and we've seen that it needs some improvement. So kind of just like any other API you're working with, it evolves.
For sure.
So not sure if we got a.
Okay. Well, I think
we got a bottom line here or not.
I think it was a good discussion. I think, Tierney, does that give you enough to kind of, redo, like, or maybe capturing that issue, like, here's the proposal, the way forward with the key kind of concerns and issues and areas we talked about?
I hope so. I will try to capture that, and please, correct me if I'm wrong on any of the points I assert in there.
Yeah, as long as you're comfortable putting together a first step, then everybody can jump in. And
I guess one thing I do want to know, what is the status of that PR? Should it be merged? Should it be tweaked? That is kind of the thing I need to know to proceed. And I don't care what the answer is, but I'm willing to do whatever. But I have the kind of steps after it lands, but that those all presume that lands in some shape or form. And I guess I don't know.
So what's that PR number again?
Give me 1 second here. It is 489.
Okay, because I'm wondering if, from my perspective, being able to see here's like what we're planning to do overall, then lets you answer, well, does that particular PR fit in with that, right?
Yeah, and I think that the point of have the data as indices and be able to export it into multiple things, that you probably want to go down the path of a new indices folder, or just export that into, we don't have the bit of putting it into Vladimir's repo yet. And so, that PR might, it won't go to Vladimir's repo, but the data from it might. So that would, again, make sense as a different directory.
I would definitely wouldn't see a PR that has the index.json and those two going in, because it really should be that we add some automated process that will update those, right?
Yeah. And I mean, that, for what it's worth, that's in that PR. And so that, this is those are the data that has generated.
Right.
And it's less the node side of it is in there. But the automation, I believe from what Vladimir was saying, would go into the other repo. Although I could be wrong.
Well, I think we even discussed, though, potentially this, the file will end up in the security working group repo if it's considered to be part of the core delivery. There could be we currently have I forget what the directory is, but say there's a vulns directory, there could be a vuln/formats, and then you could have JSON's, tab separated, whatever the other ones are, and so you might come up with something like that. But it's more about, I could see potentially landing the pieces that are in there, which are the create npm index and create core index.
Yeah.
But not the index,
the
two indices themselves, as sort of, that would be a working step towards, okay, here's something which will create them. People can then PR changes against that. But really, I think the biggest next step is a issue that says, here's what we're going to be generating, and here's going to be the flow of how, somebody makes a commit to updates a PR. What are all the things that happens in terms of, how is that actually going to end up resulting in the new index file being generated? Where is it going to go? Does it go to the website as well or not? That, something covering that proposal.
Okay, cool. I can take that as next steps, and I'll also put that in the issue. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Sounds good. Okay, any more discussion on that front before we move on? Okay, I think then we were at the end of the agenda, and we're pretty much at the end of the time, I think, but let's just flip over to see if there are any questions on the YouTube channel. I see one question, which was, is Node.js more secure than Java? I think I'll agree with Vladimir that that's kind of a broad question for us to answer. And not necessarily the scope of our working group to argue one way or the other necessarily. They're just quite different, I would say.
Yes, but we put the Java in JavaScript sometimes. Okay, so I think at that, then we'll call it a day for today. Thanks for everybody for taking the time to attend. Thanks a lot.
Okay, talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.